Hello anime and manga fans, I'm Kyle Glockner and welcome back to another episode of Animanga. Defining a top 10 of anything can be difficult, and for everyone I've talked to, shows, movies, and anime can be among the hardest to make a definitive decision on. For me personally, there are so many shows that I absolutely adore, but I just can't bring myself to rank certain shows above others. Even now, I have a vague idea of several of my favorite shows, and there are only a couple series that I know are above others, but those are few and far between. I've talked about many of these shows before on Animanga, and today I want to talk about one that is definitively in my top 10, and perhaps even in my top 5. And while Brendan technically reviewed this show already on Goof, it was at a point when only 8 episodes were out, and I feel as though the series changed a lot in the second half of its run. So without further ado, today I'll be talking about Re:Zero. Re:Zero features Natsuki Subaru as he just kind of ends up getting transported to another world on his way home from the convenience store. As he gathers his bearings in this new world, he comes across a mysterious girl named Amelia and gets wrapped up in trying to help her get back something that was stolen from her. Through this, the two end up being brutally murdered by an unseen assailant, and as Subaru lays dying in a pool of his own blood, he discovers that he has gained the ability to go back to a specific point in time, not unlike a save point in a video game. However, the catch to this ability is that it only triggers if he dies. Now, I've said this with a couple shows now, but the premise of Re:Zero was the first thing that really gripped me. The idea of a character being able to go back in time in order to try to make a scenario play out differently is interesting enough, and time travel is no stranger to anime as seen in a show like Steins Gate, but adding the stipulation of death was truly something I hadn't seen before. Part of why I watched this show was that I wanted to see how exactly this show would play out and what sort of stakes the show would present when death is more of a benefit than a detriment to our protagonist. Playing into that, while the basic premise was enough to grab my attention, the way it factors into the plot is downright stellar. An arc of Re:Zero consists of Subaru living out a handful of days with those around him, only for him to die in some way or another, bringing him back to the beginning of that particular loop and doing whatever he can to prevent his own death, as well as the death of those around him in some cases. Given that, there's an underlying mystery theme to Re:Zero as you try to figure out what exactly is going on behind the scenes of each arc and what Subaru can do to avoid his untimely death. Each arc really pulls you in because of this, and it allows the viewer to piece the situation together along with Subaru. It's something truly unique, at least for the isekai genre, and definitely helped this show stand out. But the main thing that I love about this show are its characters. There are many characters throughout the series run, and they each play a role that just couldn't be filled by anyone else. Everyone has at least one shining moment and contributes to helping Subaru in one way or another, but really, it's the main 3 characters, Subaru, Emilia, and Rem, that made me love this show as much as I do. I can confidently say that Natsuki Subaru is one of my favorite protagonists. There are a lot of things that make him an unlikable protagonist, but I really feel like there's more behind these unlikable traits that make him a fantastic character. On a surface level, Subaru can be described as arrogant, stubborn, happy-go-lucky, and ignorant. From that description alone, you might already hate Subaru, but his character goes much deeper than just that. There are a lot of factors to Subaru's ability to return by death that play into his character as a whole. One of those factors is that he can't tell anyone about this ability. Any attempt to do so results in the threat of death to Subaru or those around him, which basically leaves Subaru being held at gunpoint throughout the entire series. Because of that, he is mostly alone in his suffering, constantly seeing those he cares for die, as well experiencing the trauma of his own death several times, and feeling the pain of dying each and every time wears down on his mind. But throughout most of it, he maintains his happy-go-lucky persona in order to make everyone not worry about him. However, there are several times when this persona cracks and even shatters, and Emilia and Rem are the ones to see through his facade at times and offer him much needed solace and comfort. There are 2 very specific episodes that exemplify this, those being episode 8 and another episode that plays a much more significant role in the series overall, and is one of my favorite episodes of anime, and that is episode 18. Episode 18 of Re:Zero is famous in its own right. This episode, which featured about 2 to 3 extra minutes of content compared to your standard anime episode, almost solely focuses on Subaru giving into the pain and stress of trying again and again to save those he cares about, but not being able to because of his own inability to do anything. In that moment, he is ready to give up and move on, leaving everything behind in order to avoid the perpetual agony he's being put through. However, Rem is there to convince him to keep moving forward and to not give up, and while there's way more to that episode than what I just described now, that's the basic gist without going too in-depth in order to avoid spoilers. But episode 18 is the absolute best episode of Re:Zero. This is one of the most heartfelt and emotional scenes I've seen in anime. All of Subaru's arrogance, cockiness, and stubbornness is stripped away, and what remains is a broken shell, having given up on everything he has been fighting for throughout the entire series. It was a very deep look past the usual mask Subaru wears in order to hide his insecurities, and to see Rem lay all of her feelings bare to help lift Subaru out of the abyss he was in is incredibly tear-jerking. Seeing Subaru grow from this episode is amazing, and it's these interactions between these three characters, seeing them support each other at various points of the show, that just made me love all three of them. This is, in my opinion, one of the best trios I've seen in anime, and while I know many people were disappointed by Subaru rejecting Rem in favor of Amelia, I just feel like that decision really exemplifies one of Subaru's strongest traits, which is his conviction and dedication to his goal. And now, there's just one more thing I'd like to touch on before ending this review. I've occasionally talked about how a show holds up as an adaptation of the source material, and it is one of the many reasons that I love ReZero. It's obvious that there is a ton of passion poured into the adaptation of ReZero. Covering 9 whole light novel volumes, there was a lot to cover in this 25-episode series. Keep in mind that for a typical 12 to 13 episode adaptation of a light novel, the material adapted is usually taken from 2, maybe 3 volumes. Now for some shows, if there's something big happening, or more often in the climax of a show, the opening animation or the closing animation will be omitted, giving the production team extra time to work with in the episode for telling the story. With ReZero, I would say that about 80% of the episodes completely omit the opening and ending, choosing instead to squeeze out as much material as they can into the limited amount of episodes they have. And even then, there are several episodes that surpass the standard length of an anime episode, as I said before with episode 18. And even then, there are a surprising amount of details left out of this adaptation. But after reading what was left out, I feel as though the things that were removed were done so with the knowledge that they either don't matter much to the overall plot, or are relevant to events that happen in arcs after what the anime covered. That being said, I'm very curious to see what they'll do with some of the information that was left out of Season 1 when it becomes relevant in the upcoming Season 2. But putting that aside, it is clear that the people working on this project truly cared about what they were working on, and that passion shines through in the final product. So many little details throughout the adaptation work together to make this a truly wonderful experience of a show, and I highly recommend reading up on the circumstances and the inner workings of the ReZero adaptation. Overall, I absolutely love ReZero. It's a series that uses everything it can to its advantage and does so very well. Its popularity is well deserved, and knowing that Season 2 is finally on the horizon makes me really excited to see what happens next, as I've been avoiding spoilers all this time just to experience it fresh as it airs. ReZero was directed by Masaharu Watanabe, written by Masahiro Yokotani, and animated by White Fox, while the original light novel and web novel were written by Tappei Nagatsuki and illustrated by Shinichiro Otsuka. I could sing the praises of this show for hours, and condensing that into this review has been one of the hardest things I've had to do for a review. So at this point, all I'll say is please check out ReZero. I hope you love it just as much as I do. But that's all the time I have for today, so let me know what you think by tweeting me at ZTVGoofingOff using the hashtag Animanga. Until then, I'm Kyle Glockner, and this has been Animanga.